Shalom, shalom, friends. How's it going? Just need, just need to double check here that I am live. So bear with me just a moment, friends. If I am live, welcome to the Watchdog, exclusively, of course, on the Synagogue. Blessings to you all in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I am CJ Cox. This is the Watchdog. And yeah, I'm just looking for clarification right now that I am live. And it looks like I am actually. Good stuff. So, once again, welcome to the Watchdog, friends. Nice to be seeing you guys here. I know we've been trying to do these on the mornings, and this one's kind of late tonight, so I apologize for that. I also apologize for having to push it off a little bit. But you know me, I'm habitually terrible at everything. So here we are. I see Nightmare is in the chat. Shalom, Nightmare. Obviously, very happy to have one of my regulars here. Anybody else who is here, shalom to you as well. If you are here, please do like, please do share, please do subscribe if you have not done so. And of course, get this out to all your different social media accounts. What good is a message without an audience to hear it? So we got some pretty interesting stuff to be talking about today. None of it good because the news is just perpetually a horror pit. But obviously some things that are going to be very interesting. Some things that I think are definitely important for the rest of the world. Obviously, you guys see my headline, so you know that some of this stuff is, in regards to the violent rhetoric coming from the political sides, both right and left, right? But nonetheless, it is stuff that we need to be informed about, so we're going to go ahead and get into it. Now, obviously, before we get into anything of that nature, we are going to be having our pre-article discussion as we do. And today's discussion is going to center around the Super Bowl, actually. Not the Super Bowl itself, because I could care less about the Super Bowl. I was a really big football fan until football decided that they were going to literally worship at the altar of convicted rapists and murderers. But they have decided they want to do that, so I'm no longer a big football fan. But nonetheless, that's not the point of this video. What is the point of this video? Well, a whole lot of things have been said over on the Twitterverse about Tom Brady. Specifically, Tom Brady's support for former President Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States, of course, in case you haven't heard of him. And basically, what all this Twitter conversation has centered around is the fact that Tom Brady still has a job despite supporting a quote-unquote fascist. But Colin Kaepernick does not have a job simply because he kneeled for equality, right? And so people are comparing Brady in a negative light to Kaepernick, saying Kaepernick should still have a job, Brady should be out. Some have even gone as far as to actually claim that Kaepernick should be almost like a replacement of Brady, right? Like Brady should be out of the league and Kaepernick should be starting, perhaps even with the Buccaneers. I mean, who knows, right? And, saying things like, oh, Brady's going to be remembered as a great player, but Kaepernick's going to be remembered as a hero and all this other kind of stuff. And, just going on and on and on, as Twitter does. And I just can't help but comment. You know what I mean? I just cannot help but comment because it is so ridiculous to compare Colin Kaepernick to Tom Brady. Now, for those of you who are not sports fans, let me tell you that both of the quarterbacks who I have just mentioned are incredibly phenomenal athletes. They're both very good and in different ways. Kaepernick is what you would, refer to as a scrambling quarterback. So he runs a lot, right? He's not just somebody who throws the football and heads under center, but he also runs around in the pocket a little bit to try and create a play and, breaks from the line of scrimmage to get down the field sometimes, right? Very good athlete, cannon arm, good head on his shoulders, super fast, runs like a deer, right? A lot of good things about Kaepernick. Brady is a phenomenal mind and a phenomenal passer. He is also just incredibly cool under pressure. In fact, famously in 2016, it actually would be in January or February 2017, but it was the 2016 season. Brady led a 25-point comeback in the Super Bowl, and that 25 points that they were down was at the start of the fourth quarter. Now, those of you who know math know that there are 4 quarters, right? So he literally had 1 quarter of the game left, 15 minutes of game time, and yet managed to eliminate a 25-point deficit and get the Patriots the win. It was quite impressive game, actually. So both very impressive athletes, though, is the point, right? And both in their own respectable way. I'm certainly not amongst those conservatives who thinks that Colin Kaepernick lost his job because he was genuinely bad at football. That's just not true, right? Colin Kaepernick is actually very good at football. However, I'm also not going to play this liberal game where we pretend Colin Kaepernick is even one iota of what Tom Brady has accomplished. There's something about specifically the NFL, but really this does apply to all, not just sports, but just companies that are going to have to, put your face on their brand. And you got to remember, these sports teams are companies, right? The Arizona Cardinals, for example, are a company based in Arizona selling the product of football and the product, of course, of these athletes' personalities. The only reason for a company to make you their face, right, to get the media attention on you and also allow you to use that media attention for something, anything really, right? Whether it be Michael Sam being a homosexual or Tim Tebow being a devout Christian or Hussein Abdullah praying in the end zone to Allah or Ray Rice beating his girlfriend or Colin Kaepernick kneeling, right? You can go on and on and on and on. The only reason for them to give you that platform and allow you to actually use that platform for whatever it is that you want to use that platform for, rather than just playing sports, is because you are so good that the headache is worth it. Okay. Randy Moss was so good that many teams thought that the headache was worth it. Ricky Williams was so good that many teams thought, specifically Dolphins and Saints in his case, that he was worth it. Right. Michael Vick was good enough that the Eagles decided after he got out of prison, he was worth it. Adrian Peterson, so on and so forth, right? But these guys are world-class athletes, right? Colin Kaepernick simply isn't. Are there 32 quarterbacks, which is the number of NFL teams? Are there 32 quarterbacks in the NFL which are better than Colin Kaepernick? No, I don't believe so. Well, probably yes now, but at the time he left the league, no. Is he going to the Hall of Fame? Is he one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time? Does he have 7 different rings? With 2 teams, I might add now? No, he just simply doesn't, right? Colin Kaepernick is not in that sphere. Tom Brady, on the other hand, is not only in that sphere, he basically owns it. And I say that begrudgingly. I'm not a Tom Brady fan, right? But he is literally, at this point, got so many records, playoff winning records, passing records, Super Bowl winning records, Super Bowl appearing records, passing yards in a Super Bowl, passer rating in a Super Bowl, so on and so forth, right? And not to get this into just a purely sports show, because it's obviously, that's not the point. The point is, in this particular conversation, that Kaepernick is not in the same universe as Tom Brady is when it comes to football. On top of that, Tom Brady is not public with any of his political beliefs. Tom Brady supports Donald Trump behind closed doors, not on Bill Belichick's time or now in Bruce Arians' time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? This is a big deal because essentially what we're seeing happen in the world is that these people, right, these fans and media pundits and things like that are actually starting to belittle people in their accomplishments, even in things that we would have never thought possible, like sports, right? And try to replace these phenomenal athletes with very good, but certainly not phenomenal athletes based off of the agenda that other athlete happens to support, right? I don't like Brady's agenda. I do like Kaepernick's agenda. So let's replace one with the other as if the two were even remotely comparable. And of course, we've seen this happening throughout the country and even the world in various fields quite a bit. It happens in acting all the time, right? Actors and screenwriters who are revealed to be conservative in some way, shape, or form are chastised. Well, here we have it with Tom Brady as well. And the glorification of Kaepernick, even though Kaepernick, in reality, he was a good player who had his message. He's now known for his message. He seems to be content with that, right? But he's certainly not the kind of person who deserves to get another well, not that it deserves to get another shot per se, but that it deserves to be lumped in the same category as Brady, right? And so I just wanted to talk about that. I couldn't help but talk about that because I think it's ridiculous. I also wanted to note while I'm on that subject that the mayor of Tampa actually said that she was going to be arresting people who did not actually show up to the Super Bowl in masks. I'm fairly certain that Forrest Gump is probably somewhere in her bloodline, maybe somebody even a lot dumber, but I'll have to double check with that. Anyways, Fifth Trumpet asks, so what happened with the drone thing? Well, Fifth Trumpet, I don't know if you watch Watchdogs or not, but I actually usually go into just a discussion of sort of random stuff before I get into my articles. So I haven't actually talked about it yet. But now I'm about to. So this is a joke, but I feel like it's a good way to sort of describe the utter hypocrisy, the rank, disgusting hypocrisy that we see amongst the left in the United States. Dems announced drone team, Unity. Like I said, that's obviously a joke, right? They didn't actually announce a new team of droners that are called Unity. But what they did do is actually what I told you in the title here. Lefties are actually calling, at least some, specifically some people on MSNBC. We're going to get to the article in a moment. Lefties are actually calling for drone strikes. Yes, drone strikes, right? As in flying little robotic things across the country to send missiles at people, right? On their fellow American citizens, specifically Trumpers. Ladies and gentlemen, I kid you not. I kid you not. This is actually the level that the left is at. And by the way, this shouldn't be surprising to you even in the slightest. This shouldn't be surprising to you even in the slightest. Why do I say that? Because this is already the group, these leftists, right? This is already the group that has said online that they want you doxxed, that has said that they would like you sent to re-education camps, that has said they want to note every single person who was a Trump supporter and hold them accountable, quote unquote, that has called you Nazis, that has called you terrorists, even some of you who aren't even necessarily Trump supporters but have a conservative view like myself, right? Doesn't matter. You're a neo-Nazi, you're a Confederate, you're a racist, you're a terrorist, you're a traitor, so on and so forth, right? That's the way these people think. So it should not surprise you that even in the highest echelons of their activism sphere, and indeed, I bet in the highest echelons of the government, they're perfectly fine with using violence against you. They're perfectly fine with it. And we're going to see that here today. Real briefly, let me pull up this article here. I'm having a little issue, friends. Just a moment. There we go. Share screen. All right. So, MSNBC's Wallace floats possibility of drones striking right-wing Americans. Now, you're finding this on the Tatum report, as far as where I'm sharing it with you, but it actually comes originally from the Western Journal, and the writer is C. Douglas Golden. But yes, MSNBC's Wallace floats possibility of drone striking right-wing Americans. That is Nicole Wallace, to be clear. Let's get into the article. Give MSNBC's Nicole Wallace some credit. It's been a solid week since someone on her show has talked about drone strikes against U.S. citizens on American soil, which, of course, drone strikes against U.S. citizens is not something that would be new to the left. In fact, Obama was quite fond of doing it back in his time. I know that doesn't sound like rhetorical continence, but you take what you can get these days. Wallace, an erstwhile Republican operative, has done well off. Oh my goodness, one second. An erstwhile Republican operative has done well off of the Lady Macbeth grift in the past few years. Each weekday on the Peacock Network's hard left cable subsidiary, she rubs her hands raw with pumice, I'm sure that I didn't say that right, soap, trying to wash off blood that isn't there. Normally, this is harmless stuff. In fact, it's funny sometimes. If you can track down the clips of her calling then presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg and anti-Trump anthem-kneeling U.S. women's national team soccer star Megan Rapinoe chicken soup for her soul, Yes, she really said that. Or the segment from August of 2018 where she hyped up the presidential chances of Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti. Yes, that actually happened. By the way, CNN was quite fond of him as well. Quote, if they decide they value a fighter, most people would be foolish to underestimate Michael Avenatti, end quote, Wallace said of the stout-like con man, now a convicted extortionist awaiting trial for allegedly bilking Daniels and tax and bankruptcy fraud. They're downright uproarious. And of course, he actually even tried to blackmail Nike, if you guys remember that. That was pretty funny. Wallace's unserious bilge has serious consequences, however, when she po-facedly floats the idea of killing Americans in drone strikes because they're terrorists who listened to Donald Trump. On Friday's edition of Dateline White House, Wallace and her panel discussed a National Terrorism Advisory System bulletin, which warned that, quote, some ideologically motivated violent extremists with objections to the exercise of governmental authority and the presidential transition, as well as other perceived grievances fueled by false narratives, could continue to mobilize, incite, or commit violence. One more time, that says, quote, some ideologically motivated violent extremists with objections to the exercise of governmental authority and the presidential transition, as well as other perceived grievances fueled by false narratives, could continue to mobilize or to incite, or commit violence, end quote, according to Blaze Media. Now let's translate a little bit of this before we move forward. Some ideologically motivated violent extremists with objections to the exercise of governmental authority. Now that is a really, really, really long way of saying libertarians and constitutionalists. Really, you could just say libertarians because it's sort of a catch-all term that would include constitutionalists as well as anarchists and ANCAPs and so on and so forth, right? Objections to the exercise of governmental authority. In other words, they do not believe that the government would have some, authority that they would claim to have. They have some sort of objection maybe to the government's ability to mandate you to have a mask or to mandate you to take a vaccine or to mandate you to stay home from church. And, I don't know why those three examples came to my mind. Perhaps there's something going on in the last year. I don't know. But, I'm sure you can figure out other examples for yourself that are probably a little bit more pertinent to your current situation. But nonetheless, that's what they mean. Ideologically motivated, what they would claim violent extremists, even though none of these people are doing anything violent, with objections to the exercise of governmental authority, right? That would be libertarians, constitutionalists, states' rights folks, Ammon Bundy's, Ron Paul's, Ted Cruz's, perhaps you. And of course, they have objections to the presidential transition. So what would that mean? That would mean people who think that there is some level of fraud in the current election. That happens to be a huge number of people, millions upon millions of people. In fact, not even exclusively Trump supporters. But nonetheless, that's one of the groups that they look at here as also being ideologically motivated violent extremists. Those who have objections to the presidential transition. Even having objections makes you an ideologically motivated violent extremist. And of course, as well as other perceived grievances fueled by false narratives, right? So they're not going to give any sort of credence or credit whatsoever to the narrative. They're not going to actually try to address it. They're not going to try and meet you where you are. Because, if you obviously believe something wrong, that's what a good person would do, right? Is try to get you out of it. But no, they're not even interested in that, right? And they say they could continue to mobilize to incite or commit violence, as if they have been doing so in the past. As if what happened on January 6th wasn't literally a fluke. That has not happened at any point in time. How long has it been that we've had genuine conservative violence? Honestly. Honestly, I know some people are going to bring, what about the Bundys 2014, 2016? The Bundys weren't actually violent, buddy. The Bundys didn't harm anybody. They were harmed by federal agents, right? That's no different than the NFAC or the Black Panthers, whom you defend all the time. And I don't actually have a problem with you defending them, by the way. Who are you going to go back to after that? Waco? That's a religious cult. Try again. 1992, the government was at fault there and actually was found guilty in court. Try again. 1992, by the way, was Ruby Ridge, for those of you who don't know. When is the last time that you actually have large-scale right-wing violence? I guess perhaps Timothy McVeigh may have been right-wing. I don't know enough about him actually to determine. But I think that he did want to attack the government building as retaliation for Waco. So I don't know if that necessarily counts as a right-wing opinion as much as it is just a religiously motivated opinion. But I don't know. I don't know enough about McVeigh to actually say. But let's say it is McVeigh. 1995. Okay. 26 years ago. When's the last time we had mass instances of leftist violence? Occupy Wall Street, BLM protests in 2015, BLM protests in 2016, anti-Trump protests in 2017, Berkeley in 2017. Oh, well, I guess Charlottesville. Sorry, I guess I did miss Charlottesville. That one was pretty recent. My bad. All right, Charlottesville, and then you got to go all the way back to 1995. We do want to correct the record here. But again, right, and I haven't even gotten to 2020 yet, right? I haven't even gotten to Antifa trying to bomb an ICE facility or having a mass shooter up in Dayton, Ohio, right? But apparently it's the right-wingers who are going to continue to mobilize and incite violence. Anyways, the subtext obviously refers to extremist far-right militias, which they should not actually use that word extremist, I think. I think that is even dangerous for the Western Journal here to be using because it legitimizes the rhetoric that is being used against these people who are enacting their constitutional rights. Okay, I am sorry if you disagree with this, but you're wrong. The Second Amendment of the Constitution is not just your right to privately own firearms, which it is. It is also your right as citizenry to form well-regulated militias. Read it for yourself. It says it quite plainly. It says the right to the right of the people to bear arms, and it might be a well-regulated militia as actually first. The right to a well-regulated militia and the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. You can go look it up for yourself. It's literally on the internet. It's in virtually every library in the country. It's not that hard to find. The subtext obviously refers to extremist far-right militias, a legitimate threat, although it's good to see political points being scored with talk about other perceived grievances fueled by false narratives. And I would actually want to challenge the person who was writing this. What exactly do you think is a legitimate threat out of some of these, quote, far-right militias? Give me some examples. Right? Do you think Ammon Bundy is a threat? Because Ammon Bundy was defending his property from a government organization that had gotten too big and too powerful, namely the BLM, as well as Cliven Bundy, right? Are you talking about the Oath Keepers, right? Because they do nothing but protect people from leftists. You're talking about the Proud Boys. They also do nothing but protect people from leftists. So I would really like to know who these extremist far-right militias are. Because they're not any of the groups that I know of. And if you want to go back to the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and start talking about the Jewish Defense League and the Army of God, more power to you. But I wasn't even born yet. Many of you weren't even born yet. Right? What are these extremist far-right militias that exist now, that are committing crimes now, that are threatening governments now? Again, January 6th was a fluke, and everybody knows it. That's why they keep going, oh, January 6th, January 6th, January 6th. You would think if they had a long laundry list of things, it would be January 6th and X, Y, and Z, but it isn't. Why? Because they only have the one, because it is a fluke. Wallace and the panel seize upon this, saying the bulletin described, quote, a persistent threat of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism carried out in the ideology and around this belief that the election was fraudulent and the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. Yes, you heard that again. But let's go ahead and repeat it. Quote, a persistent threat of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism, carried out in the ideology around this belief that the election was fraudulent, that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. So if you believe the election was fraudulent, or you, believe that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary, Wallace and her panel describe you as being a domestic extremist or terrorist. I am interested to know when the last time we had terrorism against COVID restrictions was. That would be an interesting thing. Never heard that one before. I guess you can make the argument with the fraudulent election part about January 6th, but I have not heard anybody saying that there's terrorists in the name of repealing all the COVID restrictions. Just hasn't been seen. Unless, again, you want to talk about people who had the audacity to protest and to defend themselves when they did protest, like Ammon Bundy, like the Proud Boys. All those are ideologies pushed by Donald Trump. They finish. So if this is domestic terrorism, what do we do to actual terrorists like Al-Qaeda members? Well, it just so happens that Wallace has an answer for that. Quote, we had a policy, and it was very controversial. It was carried out under the Bush years and under the Obama years of attacking terrorism at its root. Wallace said, of going after and killing, and in the case of Anwar al-Awlaki, an American, a Yemeni American, with a drone strike for the crime of inciting violence, inciting terrorism. Let's read that again. Let's go ahead and make sure we have complete and total clarity of mind. We're not in the Twilight Zone. We ain't tripping. Nobody's taking no LSD here today. You're not dreaming, right? We have clarity. We want to make sure we hear this well and that we're not misrepresenting our honorable opponents. Quote, we had a policy, and it was very controversial. It was carried out under the Bush years and under the Obama years of attacking terrorism at its root, of going after and killing, and in the case of Anwar al-Awlaki, an American, a Yemeni American, with a drone strike for the crime of inciting violence, inciting terrorism, end quote. Yes, she is okay with drone striking Americans. In this case, Americans on American soil. By the way, I personally wasn't even okay with the drone striking of al-Awlaki. You don't get to drone strike without any trial by jury your fellow American citizens. That's not how it works. We have a constitution in this country. You have a right to face your accusers. You have a right to a trial by jury. You have the right to a public defender. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided to you. You have the right to a speedy and public trial. You have the right to have your Miranda rights read to you, so on and so forth. To be protected from double jeopardy, and so on, and so on, and so on. Read the Constitution for yourselves, as well as numerous other SCOTUS declarations. But she's actually floating the idea of attacking people here on U.S. soil. Trying to bring back to memory this disgusting policy put forward by filth like Bush and Obama. And yes, I do mean filth. As far as politics is concerned, those men were filthy. They are disgusting. And I'm sorry if my rhetoric sounds extreme at that point. Okay, but when you are drone striking people without trial, when you are torturing people, when you are invading countries leading to hundreds of thousands of lost lives over nothing, yes, I find you to be disgusting, and I will not hold back on that. But this woman actually wants to have these things happening on the United States soil to people who believe that COVID restrictions are too strong, or to people who believe that you don't actually, or that we don't actually have evidence, right, that the election was legitimate, right? It's what they're saying. It's not what I'm saying. That's what they're saying. You can see it for yourselves, right? It's right here. Al-Awlaki, a Yemeni-based cleric, did a whole lot more than incite terrorism. And by the way, even though I do, again, disagree with just striking him, with not arresting him and bringing him to trial and having him actually, extradited here by the Yemeni government or something along those lines, right? It is still true he did a heck of a lot more than just simply inciting terrorism. He was an actual terrorist. He was a key propagandist for al-Qaeda in Yemen, communicated with the Fort Hood terrorist shooter prior to the attack, and subsequently said the shooter was a hero, and was a recruiter for the terrorist group, and was a fugitive from justice at the time he was killed. So, completely the same as Donald Trump, who, of course, would be one of the people they would actually want to drone strike, of course. And again, I don't believe that the United States government had legitimate precedent to actually strike al-Awlaki. I do not. And I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Okay, I'm sorry. I just simply do not. You do not have a right to drone strike U.S. citizens. And I said that at the time. It wasn't on WATCHDOG, so there's no record of that. I was only 16 at the time, I believe, 15 or 16. But I said that at the time, and I've said it since I've started these watchdogs, and I will continue to say it into the future. And I will criticize anybody right, left or center, who actually says anything otherwise. Okay? Just like I was criticizing Donald Trump when he said we need a hell of a lot worse than waterboarding. I'm sorry, no, we do not. This country does not torture. Cruel and unusual punishment we decided to get rid of. Have you read the Constitution, sir? In this case, these people are just completely and totally ignorant of the Constitution. In fact, much more likely they're just outright ignoring it. They don't care about it. Because, you see, the Constitution, that pesky little document, gets in the way of oppressing you filthy peasants who are watching the show now. Let's go ahead and listen to what Nicole Wallace actually had to say so that you don't have to take my word for it, or Tatum Report's word for it, or the Western Journal's word for it. Let's listen, shall we?
And again, it's not us saying so, John Hammond. That is a bulletin released to all law enforcement earlier this week that there is, until the end of April, a persistent threat of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism carried out in the ideology and around this belief that the election was fraudulent, that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. All of those ideologies pushed by Donald Trump. But my question for you is around incitement. We had a policy, and it was very controversial. It was carried out under the Bush years and under the Obama years, of attacking terrorism at its root, of going after and killing, and in the case of Amr al-Awlaki, an American, a Yemeni American, with a drone strike for the crime of inciting violence, inciting terrorism. Mitch McConnell was in the Senate then. He was in the Senate after 9/11 too. How does Mitch McConnell, who understands that the way you root out terrorism is to take on, in the case of Islamic terrorism, kill those who incite it, how does he not vote to convict someone that he said on the floor of the Senate incited an insurrection?
So, you heard it for yourself there, right? She's literally comparing Donald Trump to a terrorist, comparing this impeachment to an event of drone striking, and making the claim that perhaps this kind of thing is legitimate. Maybe Mitch McConnell should support this. You think it's really going to end in impeachment when they're making these kinds of comparisons? Of course not. Of course not. You think it's going to end in impeachment when AOC is saying she wants to have Trump supporters rounded up? Of course not. Listen to this. How does Mitch McConnell, who understands, as if it's a fact, that the way you root out terrorism, as if that's what this is to take on, in the case of Islamic terrorism, and kill those who incite it? You can get rid of some of the fluff here, which is to take on, in the case of Islamic terrorism. Let's just get rid of that fluff here. How does Mitch McConnell, who understands the way that you root out terrorism is to kill those who incite it, not vote to convict someone that he said on the floor of the Senate incited an insurrection? You can see the quotes for yourself. You know that what I'm removing is fluff. You know that that's what she actually means. Now, of course, this guy asked the question, is Wallace calling for drone strikes against these militias or just throwing things against the wall and seeing if they'll stick? Personally, I don't really think it matters, right? I don't think you should say those sorts of things about your fellow countrymen. But nonetheless, in defense of the latter explanation, take a look at this panel and see if anyone appears there fully grokking that Wallace is talking about. I don't know if I said that right. There's a lot of words that this man is using that I'm not too familiar with. In defense of the former explanation, consider that this is the second time in a little over a week that the idea of drone strikes on American soil were floated on Wallace's show. The last time, NBC national security analyst Clint Watts, a former FBI agent, was the source. Quote, domestic terrorists have open access to weapons in ways that international extremists did not, and they have access to these leaders in ways that Al-Qaeda or ISIS could never have dreamed of, end quote. Let's go ahead and listen to the whole thing.
How do you deal with a domestic terror threat without dealing with those inciting it and spreading it?
Nicole, you can't. You'll always be on your heels. You'll always be reactive. We had a period after 9/11 where we were trying to get left of boom, as they would say, in counterterrorism, which is, can you get way up the stream of an attack and start to root out all of the confluences which bring about that attack? So as Miles is talking about, is exactly right. If you took what President Trump said and you instead put it in Anwar al-Awlaki's mouth, we would be talking about a drone strike overseas. So that's one aspect with our political leaders, talking about this rhetoric. There's several other reasons why it's more dangerous today. One, domestic terrorists have open access to weapons in ways that international extremists did not.
Really quick, I want to go back actually and have you listen to that one more time.
Al-Awlaki's mouth, we would be talking to get way up the stream of an attack and start to root out all of the confluences which bring about that attack. So as Miles is talking about, is exactly right. If you took what President Trump said and you instead put it in Anwar al-Awlaki's mouth, we would be talking about a drone strike overseas. So that's one
more time.
I could be talking mouth instead put and you President Trump said and you instead put it in Anwar al-Awlaki's mouth, we would be talking about a drone strike overseas. So that's one.
If you took what President Trump said and you put it in our Al-Awlaki, if you put it in his mouth, we would be talking about a drone strike overseas, says this scumbag. Now, of course, when you start pressing these people for details, is what exactly is it that Donald Trump said that you have a problem with, that you think actually went as far as to incite violence? It's always something bogus. It's always, well, he questioned the election. Oh, so you're not allowed to question the election? Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton, Al Gore, John Kerry. Try again, sir or ma'am. Oh, you used to see my gender? Let's start playing that game. Because I'd love to. No, see, it's only problematic when you do it, simple right-wing peasant. And by the way, I really should drop the right-wing adjective there, because they don't like any of the peasants. It's just that the left-wing peasants happen to be, people they can rely upon for votes. Let's continue listening.
Aspect with our political leaders, talking about this rhetoric. There's several other reasons why it's more dangerous today. One, domestic terrorists have open access to weapons in ways that international extremists did not.
Open access to weapons in ways that international extremists did not. So, in other words, we don't have gun control in our country. In other words, we allow militias to exist in our country. Come on, friends. Let's get past the fluff. Let's actually listen to what's being said, read between the lines here. Very few things you actually have to read between the lines to actually find anyway, because for all their dishonesty, they're actually quite honest with the way they would like to treat you. But you got to read between the lines sometimes. What's being said here? They don't like you having freedom, like your Fourth Amendment right, your Fifth Amendment right, your Sixth Amendment right, your Second Amendment right, your First Amendment right. They don't believe in states' rights, trial by jury, double jeopardy, right to have a militia, any of these things. We'll continue again.
When I was working at the FBI, 2 or 3 different periods, never did we have many ISIS supporters who could acquire handguns, long weapons, long rifles, long guns, explosives, explosive primers. If you look at that Michigan militia plot that was disrupted.
So, there you go again, right? Now he's getting a little bit more forward with it. He's talking about our access to weapons. He doesn't like it. He thinks it's a domestic terrorist threat if we actually have the right to have long rifles and handguns and explosives and things like that. And by the way, that's exactly right, sir. That's kind of the point. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form endorsing any level of violence at this moment, okay? But you guys do need to understand that the people who wrote the United States Constitution were revolutionaries. And they wanted you to have the right to have a well-regulated militia as well as firearms that were equal to the military's because they wanted you to be able to fight the military and, of course, fight the government. That was the idea. We often forget that Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, etc. would have been considered terrorists if you were British. So it's not necessarily the case that these people are wrong, right? That this is something that leads the populace to be stronger and then therefore could lead to a potential for domestic terrorism. It's not necessarily that they're wrong at all. What it is that they don't understand the point of the Constitution or the people who wrote it. And of course, why would they? Again, I don't even think they care. I think they actively ignore it because they don't like what it actually ends up requiring them to do, namely respect your freedoms and limited government. But also, let's just address the fact that it's simply not true that Al-Qaeda could not get long rifles and handguns and explosives. They sent explosives into the United States Embassy in 1995. I can't remember in which country. I think it was Libya, if I'm not mistaken. They sent explosives into the World Trade Center in 1993 and in 1998. And of course, they didn't have any explosives with them, but they did manage to, hijack 4 airplanes and destroy 3 actually buildings in New York in the World Trade Center, as well as a big portion of the Pentagon and potentially the White House. So we don't really know where that 4th plane was going. Right? It's not like these people weren't like fighting us with sticks and stones. You know what I mean? This is ridiculous. How many pictures do you have online of some dude in a turban with an AK-47 or an RPG? I mean, it's literally a cliche at this point. Like it's in every video game in the world at this point as a result of the fact that it's just a regular occurrence over in the places we're fighting. Like these people aren't armed with fully automatic weapons and explosives and things like that. Get out of here with that nonsense. But he wants you to be scared, of course, of these quote-unquote right-wing extremists. Because that fear allows him to manipulate you in a way that will allow him to, take away firearms, for example. Or, and this is, of course, the big point, kill right-wingers.
By the FBI, right about the time that Director Wray was testifying there, they were probably already on to that. They were talking about doing diversionary explosive devices. And the other thing that's different is while ISIS or Al-Qaeda was looking at doing maybe an attack on a symbolic target or a shopping mall, these guys are talking about assassinating political leaders, elected political leaders. And they have...
Once again with the lies, right? Once again, just simple lack of honesty on this man's part. They attacked only symbolic sites like shopping malls. Right, because I guess 3,000 people in the World freaking Trade Center, you idiot, doesn't count. I guess attacking the Pentagon and potentially the White House doesn't count. Or 2 different embassies and 2 different attacks on the World Trade Center before you actually destroyed it. I guess that doesn't count. Assassination of Meir Kahane, that just doesn't count. Like, who is this moron? And then, of course, these are the kinds of people who not only get positions at MSNBC, but as previously stated in the article, positions in the United States government. Because we're just perpetually useless. But of course, once again, he can't let you know any of those things because that level of honesty would allow you to know that in reality, Al-Qaeda was actually a huge threat. He's trying to downplay that threat now so that you can not focus so much on Islamic people, but focus a lot more on those pesky right-wingers who, once again, stormed a capital one single time in a fluke that has not happened before or since.
access to it, to these leaders in ways that Al Qaeda or ISIS could have never dreamed. I think the other part of it is not only the ideology, but it's the organization, the planning, and the resourcing. As we learned today, one of the indictments that came out specifically addressed the Oath Keepers. This is not a fluke social media group. This isn't a flash mob that just showed up on January 6th. You could see it forming for weeks. There were organizers behind.
The Oath Keepers, just so you guys know, because this person is once again dishonest and is claiming that the Oath Keepers were actually... First off, the Oath Keepers weren't even involved in the January 6th event. So that's just ridiculous in and of itself. The Oath Keepers' actually main rise to popularity was between the years 2011 and 2015. They've sort of weaned in the last 5 years. And yeah, they did not have involvement in the 2020 riot, or the 2021 Capitol riot, rather. I guess that was this year. So that's just a lie in and of itself. But also, the Oath Keepers have never committed any acts of terrorism whatsoever. They've never planned any assassinations. They've never gone out of their way to attack anyone for any reason, let alone an act of terrorism, bombing some kind of site or assassinating political leaders. It's just a lie. Show me the evidence. Literally, give it to me right now. I want to see somebody lay out a case that the Proud Boys, that the Oath Keepers, that all these people have actually committed acts of terrorism. I would like to see it. And I would like to laugh in their face as they try so desperately to present this evidence that does not exist. But once again, they have to fearmonger, because the fearmongering leads you, simple peasant. And of course, once again, I say that in fun. That's what they consider you. It's not what I consider you. But they don't want you, simple peasant, to actually have the ability to, form a militia, have your own firearms, or even in the case of these COVID restrictions and the election, question the narrative. They don't even want questions. Forget your right to actually have firearms and form a militia. They don't even want you to ask questions. It's weird how those things kind of go hand in hand, isn't it?
Behind it. They were planning on how to get weapons or get weapons into the District of Columbia. And they were talking about breaching property, the U.S. Capitol, federal property, at a time to overthrow an election outcome. That is domestic terrorism by all.
False. Wrong. If that was actually happening, you guys would have these mass arrests that you said were going to happen that didn't. Right? If that was actually occurring, it would be all over the news, and it's not. These are lies, friends. What has actually happened is a bunch of basically goofballs have been arrested. A bunch of people making stupid decisions. Some of them indeed seem to have had violent intent, absolutely. But it was mainly a bunch of idiots. In fact, not even all of them were right-wingers. James Sullivan, cough, cough. The main source wasn't the Oath Keepers, wasn't the Proud Boys. It was QAnon. And once again, not even the only one. A lot of them ended up being literal leftists. Not like, QAnon said they were leftist kind of things, but like actually, like James Sullivan is a leader of BLM. He's been arrested and charged at this point. Right.
All definitions. And so I'm curious to watch as the investigation moves forward. And I imagine the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and even state and locals are working on this. Each one of these people that's arrested is going to be interviewed. Each one of those interviews and the resulting investigations is going to lead to financial transactions and internet communications. And we're going to find out there was a lot more organization behind what happened on January 6th. And it's going to look a lot worse than anything we've seen in America.
Notice how he's now saying, we're going to. Why did he all of a sudden change his tune? Well, because it's just as I said, friends, this evidence isn't real. It doesn't exist. He has to say, we're going to, because they haven't found it yet. And why have they not found it yet? Because it is not there. And just 20 seconds ago, he was talking like it was there.
When we're talking about Al-Qaeda or ISIS since 9/11.
Comparing what happened on the 6th to what happened at 9/11. That is actually this man's position. What happened at the 6th is like 9/11, and President Trump is Osama bin Laden. Yes, you literally just heard that out of the mouth of one of these MSNBC losers. And I mean, I don't know what else you expect us to say about this, us as in right wingers, right? Like, you guys don't want unity at all. You guys don't want peace at all. You don't want freedom and prosperity at all. You hate this country. You hate God. You hate the family unit. You hate the flag. You disrespect everything that we stand for. You expect us to just take it. And then after a fluke, a literal fluke, you're now literally up in arms, ready to stick people in concentration camps and start drone striking American citizens. That is the actual left, friends. We've seen that in the big names with Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We've also seen that here in this little community we have. The Affilius, John Peterson, Raging Atheist. This is what these people are. They want you dead. And by the way, for those of you who are Christian, that does not give you any sort of excuse to try and go after them. You should read what your Lord has to say about persecution. But I won't get into that too deep here. This is not a call to violence, though. We are to suffer willingly as Christians. I know not all conservatives believe that. I know not all people who are Christian necessarily buy into that. But Christ said, take up your cross and follow me, not take up your musket and follow me. Obviously, we're not using muskets, but you guys know what I mean. But this is the left. This is what they want. This is what they are. They believe in doxing you. They believe in taking your children away. They believe in re-education camps. They believe in rounding you up. They believe even in drone striking you. And of course, I actually think the roundup one is worse, personally. I mean, what more can you say, right? What more can you say? And in fact, Watts seemed to believe these militia groups were more dangerous than Al-Awlaki. And in fact, he literally said so. He actually said so, right? Because militias like Oath Keepers have access he could never hope to have. And then even this guy, right? He says, while I understand far-right militias present a huge law enforcement threat at the moment, which is just not true. He's buying into a false narrative also, but I digress. I distinctly remember Al-Qaeda having taken part in some major attacks in the past 20 years or so. In fact, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of one attack that should serve to put this into perspective. Furthermore, Deadline White House panelists are apparently enamored of commingling the intentions of extremist groups like the Oath Keepers and politicians like former President Trump, Republican Texas Senator Ted Cruz, and GOP Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, as if to say they're the Al-Awlakis, of American politics because they had issues of varying intensity with the logistics of the 2020 voting process. I Am Charioteer says, what is the website you're on? The website I'm currently on is Tatum Report. This article comes from the Western Journal, which is a mainstream news source. And by the way, neither of those things matter because we listened to these people say things for themselves. We listened to Nicole Wallace, and Clint Watts, right, say for themselves that they believed that these people were actually worse than Al-Qaeda, that Donald Trump was worse than Al-Qaeda, was a domestic terrorist, and that they would be cool with drone striking them. So I don't actually have to sit here and defend my sources, right, as if Tatum Report is what I'm relying on. I listened to Wallace say it herself. I listened to Watts say it himself. By the way, when this isn't live, Mr. Charioteer, you can go ahead and check it out. In fact, Watts seemed to believe these militia groups were more dangerous than Al-Awlaki and co. Because militias like the Oath Keepers have access he could never hope to have. We just read. Furthermore, Deadline White House panelists are apparently enamored of commingling the intentions of extremist groups like the Oath Keepers and politicians like former President Trump, Republican Texas Senator Ted Cruz, and GOP Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, as if to say they're the Al-Awlakis of American politics because they had issues of varying intensity with the logistics of the 2020 voting process. Once again, I disagree with the calling of the Oath Keepers extremists, but nonetheless, we'll let that slide. This is this man's article, not mine. This isn't just disingenuous, it's dangerous. There are reasonable questions about the way we carried out the last election. unreasonable and irresponsible claims of voter fraud, and calls to overthrow the government by violent groups that blessedly don't have the resources to carry it out. Indeed, all three of those things are true. The three are entirely separate. If this is so difficult for them to figure out, none of them should be on cable news dropping vague comments about drone strikes on American citizens because it perks viewers' ears up. That unpleasant prospect, realized twice in the space of less than 2 weeks, is chicken soup for nobody's soul. And again, this appeared originally from the Western Journal, just so you guys are aware. And of course, there's going to be people like Iron Charioteer who, once again, is going to continue to, even though I just showed that we were listening to Wallace and Watts themselves, not the Tatum report. Get with the program, sir. Okay, quit attacking straw men. This has nothing to do with the website. We just watched the clips of these people saying it for themselves. Again, rewind the tape. It's right here. You want to hear it again? Let's hear it again.
And again, it's not us saying so, John Hammond. That is a bulletin released to all law enforcement earlier this week, that there is, until the end of April, a persistent threat of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism carried out in the ideology and around this belief that the election was fraudulent, that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. All of those ideologies pushed by Donald Trump. But my question for you is around incitement. We had a policy, and it was very controversial. It was carried out under the Bush years and under the Obama years, of attacking terrorism at its root, of going after and killing, and in the case of Amr al-Awlaki, an American, a Yemeni American, with a drone strike for the crime of inciting violence, inciting terrorism. Mitch McConnell was in the Senate then. He was in the Senate after 9/11 too. How does Mitch McConnell, who understands that the way you root out terrorism is to take on, in the case of Islamic terrorism, kill those who incite it, how does he not vote to convict someone that he said on the floor of the Senate incited an insurrection?
So there you go. My source is MSNBC. I'm not going to rewind back to the Clint Watts clip because I want to move on to some other stories here. But you can continue on with whatever faux arguments you want to go with, okay? The fact of the matter is, this is the left. This is what they stand for. And if you're on the left, you need to call it out. There's plenty on your side who already have. Bill Maher, Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Rogan, Andrew Yang. Tons. If you're not doing it, it's because you're willingly blind. And I'm sorry, there's just simply nothing more to say about that. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and move on to our next article here today. This one getting into some of that ecumenical stuff we like to talk about so much. And of course, you know, that news always is just, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes it's mind-numbing and stupid because it's like, you know, this is the kind of stuff that we actually, you know, you expect to see in like conspiracy theories and stuff like that, right? The ecumenical movement and Pope Francis and all the different things that he's trying to do, right? But in reality, it's actually, it comes from the Vatican News, right? This is the things that they themselves actually believe and point out. It comes from Ecumen News, right? Or Oikonos, both of which are associated directly with the World Council of Churches. It comes from American Magazine, which is directly associated with the Jesuit Order, right? So we can go to their sources. We don't have to go to InfoWars or Tatum Report or anything like that. And what do we end up finding? That as it turns out, there really is a global movement to get all of the different world religions together, and definitely in the Christian church. Definitely in the Christian side of things. But also it is seeping out and has been seeping out a long time outside of Christianity, into Mormonism, into Islam, into Judaism, to try and get these guys together in this big interreligious kumbaya. I personally would refer to it as a new world order, but you can refer to it as whatever you want. Maybe you think that's too conspiracy theorist. I don't know. I think conspiracy theorist personally is just a term that people like to use because they don't like dealing with facts, right? The idea of 9/11 would have been a conspiracy theory had the Warren Commission, or not the Warren Commission, the 9/11 Commission come to some other conclusion. Right? That's just simply, it's like literally everything that it's what the official narrative says, right? And then anything outside of that is a conspiracy theory. Sometimes the official narrative is right, sometimes it's wrong. It's not that difficult at all. But nonetheless, so this next thing we're going to be getting to, it has a lot to be doing with that. I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting tired, and so I want to kind of finish this up. But nonetheless, so the World Council of Churches is basically, they're having a meeting here today, and they're calling for an ecumenism of the heart, they say. Oh, why did that not pull up? 1 second. Just a second, my banner's not coming up. Okay, there we go. WCC calling for super soppy ecumenism of the heart. What does that even mean, right? Well, it sounds real nice in propaganda pieces, and maybe it preaches well over a pulpit. I don't know. But nonetheless, they're calling for an ecumenism of the heart. WCC looks to its 11th General Assembly with call for an ecumenism of the heart. I just think it's hilarious. It's such a stupid phrase, ecumenism of the heart. This is from Vatican News, written by Lisa Zengarini. The World Council of Churches has published a 24-page reflection on the theme of its 11th General Assembly to take place in, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Karlsruhe, Germany, from August 31st to September 8th, 2022. The text, which is the result of the work of the international group drawn from different religions and confessional traditions, is intended as a resource for churches and Christians worldwide facing new pastoral challenges related to the current COVID-19 pandemic, present world uncertainty, the ambivalences of the digital revolution, and climate change, as well as social injustice and rising xenophobia and racism. Sorry, I kind of messed up that a little bit. So I just had to stumble on through it. My apologies. The General Assembly meets every 8 years in a different town and was originally planned in September 2021 on the theme Christ's love moves the world to reconciliation and unity, but due to the COVID-19 crisis has been postponed to next year. Pilgrimage of Justice and Peace. During the 2022 event, world churches are expected to continue the pilgrimage of justice and peace, which they started in 2013 at their 10th assembly in Busan, which is in South Korea, and to discuss the next steps of their journey, focusing for the first time on the love of God, the Holy Trinity, a love revealed in Christ, and through the power of the Holy Spirit, a love moving in and through all humankind and all creation, the document explains. Noting that the theme draws on the very heart of the gospel, and reminds us that the church as the body of Christ is moved by Christ himself, the reflection calls for, quote, an ecumenism of the heart, end quote. There's that ridiculous phraseology again. Quote, many people among the churches are urging that, are urging that our seeking for unity must not be only intellectual, institutional, and formal, but also based in relationship, in common prayer, and above all, in mutual affection and love. Notice anything missing from there? Something that maybe might be really important for unity amongst a bunch of, believers in a book that happens to be about a dude who had a name that a religion actually carries to, Christians, that's right, Christ. No mention of Christ. Who needs unity around Christ when you have unity around a bunch of bogus nonsense? A bunch of platitudes that don't mean a single thing. Mutual affection and love, meaning what exactly? Every politician in the world has that to say. What does that actually mean? I know what unity in Christ means. I know what unity over the Bible means. The text tells me itself. But what do you guys mean? Nothing. It's just platitudes. But notice also, there are certain things here that do actually lead us to understand what the goal is. For example, they have reference to a common prayer, right? Well, I have to be honest with you. I don't actually share a common prayer with, for example, the Mormon or the Catholic or the Muslim. I pray to a completely different God, right? I pray for completely different things in numerous instances. Obviously, there are, people always have the same things they're going to pray for. We all wish blessings upon ourselves and our families. We all wish to be made more like the people who we are worshiping, right? We want to serve them. We want to be more servantful to them, right? But, I, for example, want to be saved from my sins. That's my prayer. That's not necessarily the prayer of the Muslim. They don't have that, that concept of atonement through the sacrifice of Christ like I do. Obviously, right? That's not the same prayer that's going to come from the Jew. And they're certainly not praying in Jesus Christ's name, right? They're certainly not praying in the manner which Jesus described when he gave the Our Father, which I only call it the Our Father because that's what you guys would know it as. You're not supposed to literally pray that verbatim, but in like manner, right? We just don't have a common prayer, but that's what they would like. They would like this common, sort of enigmatic globalistic style religion. And I don't mean globalistic in the conspiratorial way where it's like, a cabal of people eating babies or anything like that. I just mean globalistic in the sense that it's globalism, right? It's like the United Nations, like the World Council of Churches itself, right? The World Health Organization. These are globalist organizations. These people would like to set up this World Council of Churches, as well as Pope Francis, leaders of the Mormon Church, etc. They would like to set up that same thing, but for faiths. I personally find that to be incredibly dangerous. Christian Church is called to set an example. Oh, wait, no, sorry, I did not finish this particular paragraph. According to the WCC, this vocation to unity is all the more needed now in the current COVID-19 crisis. And this is an important quote, by the way, which has, quote, exposed how the assumed self-sufficiency, independence, and individualism on which so many have come to rely are but illusions. Say that one more time. Exposed how the assumed self-sufficiency, independence, and individualism on which so many have come to rely are but illusions. Freedom, you see, is but an illusion. The idea that you could be self-sufficient is an illusion. Being independent is an illusion, right? This is nonsense. Certainly abiblical, by the way. Though we human beings are not the masters of creation, but part of creation and vulnerable within it, and also brought more clearly into the light the many inequalities in the world, which is just sort of this, SJW tack on that they got to have in there because both the WCC and the Roman Catholic Church at this point are overrun with liberals. It's insane. It is truly insane to think that these, allegedly Christian organizations could be as far left as they are. Because really, when it comes to Pope Francis and the World Council of Churches, they are literally as far to the left as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, right? That's their level of, and they're that far to the left theologically speaking too, which obviously in that case it's more, critical race theory would be a better comparison, universalism better comparison, right? Because AOC is obviously political, but you get the idea, right? Like these dudes are super, super far to the left. Conservative Christianity in a lot of ways, it's not an American phenomenon per se, because obviously it came before the United States ever existed, and it does actually happen in other countries around the world. It's just a simple plain reading of scripture, right? But you would be surprised just how overrun the global churches are by rampant liberalism and godlessness. Anyways, I need to finish this because I want to be done with this. Christian Church is called to set an example. In this context, the council says that Christian churches are called now more than ever to set a leading example. Quote, the churches need now, together in a renewed ecumenical movement for the sake of the world, to find a more public voice to speak a truer hope than the empty optimism of faded political rhetoric. Let me say very quickly, in a renewed ecumenical movement for the sake of the world is something that should absolutely never be coming out of Christian leaders' mouths. Okay, we do not come together in unity with false doctrines and false faiths and evildoers, the wicked, simply so we can make the quote-unquote world better. Because that's not how it works, first off. We all know this, right? We all understand the kind of dangers that are actually associated with putting that level of power in the hands of a select few people who have religious indignation and in their beliefs, a religious calling also, right? Which is even more important than the indignation. But on top of that, it's just not what we do as Christians, okay? If there's ever ecumenism that's legit, it is around Christ and the Bible. Has absolutely nothing to do with for the good of the world. I'm sorry, it's just not the way the Christian faith works, okay? This isn't a faith of pragmatism. It is a faith of full and total submission unto Christ. I don't mean to get this into too theological stuff because I know the Watchdog isn't necessarily supposed to be theological and stuff like that. So I apologize. But, just you got to understand that. Ecumenical movement for the sake of the world, bogus. Bogus. Abiblical garbage. Jesus has overcome the world. He is a conqueror, and through him you are a conqueror. Anyways, I need to get back to the article. I'm sorry. To find a more public voice to speak a truer hope than the empty optimism of any faded political rhetoric, a hope that might build a better world than the one so deeply shaped by materialism, individualism, and consumerism. Just to let you know that these people are real far on the left, right? They really, really don't like that individualism. They really don't like that consumerism, or capitalism is really what they mean to say. A world in which resources will be shared. There's that fighting against capitalism I was telling you about. Inequalities addressed and a new dignity found among us and for all of us, as if we need a new dignity. The document reads, quote, churches that live and pray only in hidden private communities separated from one another are called by the risen Christ to be sent into the very public and open spaces of the world, to reframe our corporate senses of what matters, to make idols fall, and to be part of welcoming the kingdom of God in which the poor are blessed and the captives set free. And it is interesting how they always like to mix little truths with their lies, right? Because it is true that Jesus wants to set captives free, that he wants to have the poor be blessed, that he wants to make idols fall, that we are to, welcome the kingdom of God, right? However, that means a completely different thing than what these people are talking about. It's through submission to Christ that all of those things happen, not through some ecumenical movement, not by submission to the socio-political agendas of men, by submission to the Lord. Quote, a world crying out for profound love, for community, for justice and hope needs churches that are visibly in communion, longing for oneness where there is division and finding a new future for humankind and for all creation is expressed in Revelation. Christ's love moves the world to reconciliation and unity, the document concludes. And I'm sorry, but I personally, on pure theological grounds, I will have no unity with the Vatican. Oh, was I not sharing my screen on that? Oh, shoot. Oh, well, I was reading the article for myself. Well, sorry, I got caught up reading the comments here. It says, there is U division. You don't want to pray with others, not very loving, CJ. No, that's just, I'm sorry. That's exactly right in the sense that I don't want to pray with others. I don't want to pray with the Muslim. No. Okay? There's one way to Christ. There was one way to God, to heaven. There was one way. Only one way. Okay? And this ecumenical movement, it is of the devil. Iron Charioteer, you can say all you like about it. Your opinions just don't matter in this. I'm sorry to say, right? It just simply does not matter. And it's not because I don't love you. In fact, it's because I do love you and would like to see you and others be saved. I can't let you sit there and think that it's okay to pray to your false god or to not pray at all. But nonetheless, it's been an hour and 13 minutes. I'm tired. I'm sort of babbling. This isn't my best show. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop off. So if you guys like this, I do appreciate you liking it. And I would like you to like and share. And I would like you to subscribe as well. Hit that little bell so that you get notified every time we go live. Announcements, not really. Wednesday, Friday, more Watchdogs, right? Oh, yeah, there's a debate on Friday. Me and Smokey Saint going to be debating Cider and Port and Leophilius on the question of communism versus capitalism, so that'll be fun. That'll be over on Modern Day Debate, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. You can check that out. We'll obviously have a watchdog before that in the morning of Friday, but nonetheless, I think that's about it for announcements. I might have a debate lined up on the gospel truth here soon with Praise I Am That I Am. On the question, who were the real Jews? But that's more of a theological question, so I should probably announce that on apologetics. But nonetheless, just to let you guys know, I know I have a lot of overlap in the people who watch these programs. In fact, mostly made up of people who do overlap and watch both of the podcasts. So, I want to go ahead and let that be known. And I'm pretty sure that's about it with announcements. Usual stuff. Check me out on, Gab, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. Hit me up on Patreon if you'd like. Please subscribe. Questions, comments, critiques, and, the below section and all that. I really don't want to be doing this anymore. So I'm just going to make this quick. But before, of course, I make this quick, I do want to say God bless and blessings to you all in the name of our Lord and Savior, whose name is Jesus Christ. Of course, we want to give him all the glory. And I would like to ask you the question, in the face of Armageddon, will you compromise?